Welcome to NDTR Spotlight, the corner of the internet where NDTR shine. I'm your host, Marie-Lorraine. Now, NDTRs, there might be a pet peeve that you have, or I know I have, when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm watching people doing coaching, and they're doing coaching, nutrition coaching. And then I look a little deeper and they don't really have a solid foundation in nutrition education or nutrition, just nutrition in general. It's kind of a certification that they got online, and they're doing so much with this information, and it makes me worried. But in DTRs, this is a great opportunity for you to step into and really make a difference in the population, just doing nutrition coaching and working with the general population. But how exactly do we do that? I mean, our education is very focused on medical nutrition therapy and working with those with chronic diseases, and it's not necessarily geared towards the coaching and the general population. Well, today we have a guest who is thriving in that area. Her name is Liz. She has a master's in obesity prevention and management and a bachelor's in dietetics. She is an NDTR. She has certifications in obesity in pediatrics and adults, and she owns her own business, Core by Liz, where she does a lot of coaching and nutrition help and fitness help with individuals all throughout the country. So let us meet Liz and dive into what it's like being an NDTR working in an area that we really haven't covered on this podcast. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So it's such a treat to be able to talk to an NDTR with a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. What a beautiful combination there. Walk us through how you found the NDTR credential and then what made you go for that master's degree. So 2 questions to kick off the podcast.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I first learned about the NDTR certification when I was in my bachelor's program. I did an associate's at a community college, and then I transferred to ASU to complete my bachelor's. But in our introductory nutrition courses, they told us about the NDTR. But I, at that time, was planning on going the full route to become an RD. And then as things played out and I kind of continued my education, I kind of chose a different route, and we're going to get into that, I'm sure.
Yes.
When I completed my bachelor's, I went straight into my master's program, and then I applied for a dietetic internship. And at that time, I did not have the DTR. I did have, I think, 3 or 4 years experience in a hospital setting. I had my own business. I was a TA at Arizona State during my schooling. So I had a lot of work experience, but the only additional feedback they gave me was the only other thing you could do is get the NDTR certification and then reapply next year. And I did not end up reapplying, but I did get the DTR certification. And I was like, all right, well, I have this to kind of go along with what I'm doing currently.
Wait, that's wild. Am I getting this right? You applied and then you had your master's degree when you applied and you still didn't get.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah, I was a little frustrated at that point. I was like, man, whoever beat me in that internship must have had a heck of a lot of experience there, too. But I know they're so competitive. So
Yeah, they are, but that is frustrating hearing your credentialing or what you had coming into it and not being able to get it. But it sounds like it was leading you on the right path because you found that NDTR credential. So let's just keep the story going. You got a door closed and you found another door to walk through, and that was the NDTR credential. So what happened after that?
Yeah, so if we backtrack a little bit, when I was in school, I was working as a personal trainer. And I started my own coaching business. I kind of stumbled into coaching. I was studying nutrition and I got into weightlifting myself. And then one of my friend's mom, she wanted me to work out with her. She's like, hey, you're in such good shape. Will you work out with me? And I was like, sure, come to my gym. And she was like, no, I'm not comfortable being in a gym. Can you just work out with me in my living room type of situation, like dumbbells, kettlebells? So I did. And then her friends started joining her. And then it became this big thing where I started realizing a lot of women are not comfortable working out at gyms. So I actually created this whole business of in-home personal training for women. And I was doing that through school, just as my job while I was getting an education,
Yes.
But as I got more education, it was just more, instead of quitting that, I was like, I can expand on what I'm doing and offer, more nutrition education and help with the obesity prevention aspect and all of those things that I started to learn. So I just kind of expanded my business instead of going the other route.
That you're kind of just following the flow of life and not fighting against it and seeing the opportunities that come up and the gifts that you're receiving. And then that's great, just building that network and that reputation. When you start a business, it's hard to find clients, but it sounds like they just came to you and you responded
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. And then when I moved to Florida, that's when I started doing the virtual coaching. That was when it started becoming a little bit more popular. I did get another job in the meantime. So I worked coaching on one end and then a full-time job on the other until I built up my roster again until I could coach full-time. So I've been doing it full-time again for 2 years.
That I'm sure my listeners are like, full time, that's like most people's dream, I feel like, when they want to step into the nutrition and then the personal training aspect of it. So you mentioned that there was a lot of medical nutrition therapy just in the education, right, for NDTRs, and then the route that you were going, you were pursuing doing that fully as a dietitian, and you kind of got switched to this coaching aspect. How was that transition? Because we don't really seem to get much of that education. How did you kind of handle and figure out how to do the coaching for your clients?
Yeah, it was actually interesting just because it was like a realization I had after I finished the schooling. I was like, we didn't really learn that much about how to handle just these kind of basic cases. There's just so much information coming at us about treating, whether it's kidney disease or diabetes or very specific medical cases, but there wasn't a lot of time spent on just how to help a Gen Pop client who, just needs to lose 50 pounds or, just wants to get in better shape or things like that, besides, the basic nutrition classes. But what I ended up having to do was do mentorship programs or continued education programs that very specifically focused on how to handle those cases. So I think that's just something, if someone is not yet going the route of getting the education, I think if you're considering more going the coaching route and things like that, just knowing which degree might be better for you in that sense.
That is interesting because your master's is in obesity prevention and management. So even in that master's degree, you still didn't feel like you got that coaching aspect.
Yeah, it was a lot more about the research around obesity, and it was very much divided into the prevention side and then the management, because there is that idea of, and I don't find this to be true as a coach because I have had many clients who were considered obese and then lost the weight and sustained the weight loss. That's like a whole nother topic we could get into, of course. But the research does kind of show that most people regain the weight. So it's kind of that thing where if someone already has obesity, it's more about how can we make them healthier regardless of that weight. And then on the other end, it's also prevent people who are not yet obese from getting to that level, So it was a lot of focus on the research behind that, but not necessarily the treatment or coaching around that, more like policies and the big overbearing topics there.
Is fascinating to me because I just think about education and what I remember learning and talking to other people in the field. It's like we learn SMART goals, and then we learn calorie deficit, and then we learn kind of what you're talking about like, okay, obesity paradox, and like all of these different things and the risk associated with it. And you learn to give some interventions, but my question for you is like, what exactly can you, for our audience, what is that difference that the coaching aspect brings in that really helps you with your clients?
Yeah, I think is being a little bit more comprehensive about it. So I do have the nutrition side of things. And this is where the NDTR part is important because, like you said, there is a lot of coaches who have no actual like college education on nutrition and stuff. And I did actually reach out to the Commission of Dietetics just to ask them like, hey, this is kind of a gray area on meal plans and things like that. And it was kind of, as long as you're not treating a medical condition, because that would be more of an RD thing. But if you're just guiding someone, then I'm safe there.
Yes.
That is a plus of having the NDTR there. But I also focus on the workouts, on the sleep, on stress management. So really all the lifestyle aspects. So while I think a lot of people just think calories in, calories out, the deficit, like you said, there's a lot more going on. And I think especially with obesity, it can be those other factors that people kind of want to push aside. Like, yeah, I don't get enough sleep, or yeah, I'm really stressed, but like, let me just have the answer, and it's like, no, that's a big part of the answer.
We need to address that issue.
Yeah.
So when you address those issues with your clients, like the sleep and the stress, does the nutrition kind of just fall into play? Or do you also have to like, okay, those things are addressed, now let's work on the nutrition?
So when I do their intake, I see where they're at with nutrition and just where they're at with everything, and take really small steps. And that's something when I first started in coaching, I actually kind of had a hard time with, because you have all these tools that you can offer someone. You can write them a nutrition plan, a workout plan, all the bells and whistles. But if you just throw that at someone, especially if someone has never done anything like that before, they'll be so overwhelmed, and a lot of times they'll just give up immediately. They're like, this is a lot, you know? So
Yeah, it is a
I'll
lot.
focus on like one little change at a time. So it might be like just tracking their food so we can have that awareness of, oh, I didn't even realize what I was consuming, and then increasing their step count, and then adding the gym in. And then nutrition wise, it can go in a lot of different directions. Some people I have them learn about macros. Some people I just give them a structure of pick a food from each food group on these meals, and it's not like weighing or tracking, but at least they're like knowing what types of foods to eat. And then we could go all the way down to like a meal plan where it's very structured. So it really just depends on where the person's at when they come to me, and then how advanced we get with them.
I love that individualization that you have with your clients, because I think that's so impactful. And that's what the NDTRs can really bring to the table of like, okay, I can't just do a meal plan for everybody, because there's things like eating disorders and there's anxieties that you can bring up, and you really have to meet them where they are and then figure out a way to go from there. So that's a really great basis that you have there, and where we're all individuals and you have to kind of see them where they are.
Yeah, and that even goes with tracking data, because I have people do like check-in photos, and I have them take their weight sometimes and do measurements sometimes. But it is seeing what their history is. If there is any type of eating disorder, I don't have them do those things. And I don't treat eating disorders at all. So if someone comes to me with a history of that and they've already gotten treated, then I'm good to do that. But if they're still struggling with that, or if I see that come up, then I refer out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but still just having that mindset of like, because I feel like a lot of people can go to a nutritionist and then they come out with like some disordered eating or disordered thinking, and it can be harmful. Okay. So when you were doing your extra training, it's more looking at like the full body, the full person, like more maybe like the pillars of health, essentially. For the listeners, what exactly, I know you mentioned there's variations in looking at the full body, but what is there any coaching techniques that you learned outside of your program that was like a aha moment, like this is what I needed?
I think it is more that people are not just an equation, because that is what we are taught. I hate to say it, but she
Literally
just
said
said
it.
more and all those things. Like I, in the beginning, I would be very like, okay, let me put it. Well, let me calculate what their like BMR or TDR or whatever is.
Yes.
Then I was like, this isn't working, because yes, that gives us like a general idea, but there's so many factors. And I know there's the activity level incorporated in some of those equations, but it then goes back to the other things like their sleep, their stress levels, their hormone health, all of those different components that can change what they need calorie wise. So I will usually, like I said in the beginning, I'll kind of just see where they're at, have them track their food. And then based on what their goal is, I will adjust the food up or down and just see how they respond, and kind of continue from there, instead of I've just kind of thrown away the equations altogether, honestly.
And using some clinical judgment at that point.
Yeah, I think when you have enough experience, of course, when you're just starting, you have to use something, but
Yeah.
when you start getting the experience, you know what to look for, and you start to say, like, okay, I think this is probably going to work for this person. Let's try it. And you can always change the approach there. But I think being more open minded and realizing that people, we're humans, our bodies are so amazing and vastly different, and it's not as simple as just copying pasting a program for someone or doing the equations and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that really helps you thrive and your clients really notice that level of individualization, to say it again. But I wonder too, because you're working with the general population. And so our education is really geared towards those who are sick with a chronic disease or tube feeding, right? Then you really do need those equations, because you have to, at some point, you have to really calculate down to like as close to possible, even though it's always an estimation when you're dealing with calories and protein and all that. But a general population, like you said, there's so many variables that are hard to predict. So when someone's sick, you have all these studies, you kind of know what they're going to be dealing with, you understand some of the stressors, but a general population, you really don't know. Like, are they going to go on vacation? Like, where are they going to go for vacation? What are they going to eat? There's just different factors. So does that help you? Or like, so what are I know you mentioned that you don't necessarily have to, you have a little bit more flexibility when you're looking at those numbers, but what other differences have you seen working with the general population that you really wouldn't be able to do with maybe someone in a hospital setting, but that really works well for the population that you have.
I think just really getting them to look at it as a lifestyle versus, and this is more of a diet culture thing too, is everyone is looking for that quick fix, that type of thing. And I very much, in how I promote myself, let people know like that's not what I'm doing. I'm like, this is a long-term thing. You're learning, and my job is to educate you how to eat healthier and exercise right and find the things that work for you. This is a lifelong thing. There's no end to it. And I never intend on someone being tied to my hip forever, like relying on me for it. I really want to educate people on what they need to do to make it sustainable. And that goes back to, you know, the obesity research and everything. There's not a lot of research showing that diets are sustainable, but I think there's it's just really hard to do a proper study on any type of diet long term because the participants don't want to do it for that long.
Yes.
And usually it's like a very specific diet, not including all the things that I mentioned that we're looking at when, like, the type of program that I do where we're looking at every single variable that someone's doing. So I think it's just hard to do a proper study that would really determine whether it is possible to sustain the weight loss long term.
So you mentioned some of the diet culture that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think more just like a lot of people have the all or nothing mentality. So I think it's a lot more of digging into those things as well, of things that diet culture has taught them, or maybe things that are holding themselves back and getting into like the mental side of things. And again, staying within our scope, doing that piece too. But I think it's not just about the calories or necessarily just the food they're eating, but getting them to understand that it's more about consistency over time.
Yeah, I feel like that's easier said than done.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
up against so much. But you did say something really interesting in the beginning when we first started chatting, that you have seen your clients lose weight and then keep the weight off, which is, when you're looking at research about obesity and you're looking at diets, they like always gain some back. And that tends to be I think one of the hardest parts for dietitians and diet technicians when they're dealing with clients, is that weight gain back. So how are you successful with that with your clients?
Yeah, so I will actually be honest, and this goes into some of what people have wrong about obesity, and not necessarily us, but just the world view
Yeah.
on it is people just assume like, oh, they need to move more and eat less. But actually, a lot of the obese individuals that come to me, I have to give them more food. They're coming to me eating like 1,200, 1,300 calories, and I actually have to work them up. So it's actually beneficial that I get to reverse diet them and increase their calories as we work together. And then they kind of learn that food isn't the enemy. It's about eating the right types of foods and the right amount of foods and balancing that with exercise and all the other pieces there. It usually kind of works that I reverse diet them up to a higher amount of calories. Let's just say 1,800 to like 2,000, as it could be very different than that, but just say something around that. And they'll be losing weight, eating more. And then at a certain point, if we need to, we can actually then go back into a deficit and cut back a little bit if we need to. But I usually work in phases with people where we'll do a reverse diet. We'll hold there for a while, then we'll go into a deficit if we need to. I find if you try to just get it all off in one go, that is usually a little bit too extreme. So if you work in a little bit of shorter phases and relay that information to them, that it's more sustainable if we work in those short phases, that is how we typically keep it off, is kind of bringing them back to maintenance and making sure that what they're doing is something that's sustainable for them.
I feel like that was a nugget. That is not something we learned in school, that going up and down, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, and that's what I mean of like, I don't think I learned about reverse dieting in school. I think I learned about reverse dieting because I'm a bodybuilder as well. So like
Yeah.
there's that side of things, and it's more popular like in that world of coaching. I don't coach bodybuilders, but I do compete.
Mhm.
So I kind of found that all interesting. And there are studies about reverse dieting and things like that too. But
Mhm.
again, not something I personally learned in school. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that, and who knows, I graduated like 2016 with my master's. So maybe they're teaching it now. I don't know.
Maybe. As we learn more things, but I think that's so helpful to be able to use something like that. I mean, I know bodybuilders, that can be very dangerous and it can be harmful, and so I think a lot of times in the field when we're learning about nutrition, we kind of just stray away from that. But for you to be able to go and look at that and with an unbiased opinion and see, okay, where is the value in this and how can I use it to really help my clients?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is a lot of Gen Pop people go to the extremes that some bodybuilder type diets would be, of like how low calorie they're going or how much cardio they're doing, and they just drive themselves into the ground type of thing, where at a certain point you just can't go any lower in calories or can't do any more cardio, and you have to bring yourself out of that. But usually you need that kind of guidance or structure to it, not just go back to what you were doing before, because I think that's where one of the bigger problems is with most diets, and I say diet as like fad diets and things like that, is people do it till they reach their goal, and then they have this idea of like, oh, I'll just go back to what I was doing before. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, you have to ease your way out of it, which I think that is so impactful for the nutrition coaching. So you get the weight down, then you come back, and then if they go through that full process, then they kind of understand their body better, and then they can have that lifestyle skill long term and know that it's not one diet. You keep that for years and years until you die.
Yeah.
It's a process that you grow with. How are you able to convince your clients to trust you on a process where they're losing weight and then they might start gaining it? Like how, because that can be when you're looking at scales and you're paying somebody to help you with weight loss and the numbers are kind of going all over the place. How do you get them to trust you on that process, on that journey?
Yeah, I think something that's helpful for me as a coach, and I know this is going to be tricky depending on like where you work, but if you're a coach, you can easily have someone take pictures. I know that's not something that's typical in like a clinical setting, though. You're not having people take like check-in photos, but having a physical picture of someone, and it's usually like sports bra and shorts, like that type of thing, so I can see their body changing, because sometimes the scale will stay the same or go up, but they're losing inches, so I can literally pull up their pictures and be like, I know the scale says this, but do you see this? Because I see that, and or their clothes are fitting looser and things like that. So I think having a visual helps too. And like I said, some people I don't even have weigh themselves and we can have that data, but I will say there definitely is that building trust piece of, I have plenty of clients who are really scared when they see the scale going up, or, we're raising food up and that's something that they've never done in their life. They're like, I don't want to eat more, let's just keep doing the diet. And I think it is just, when I have a consult call with someone, I do have that type of conversation of, okay, if you sign up with me, you're trusting that I am doing what's in your best interest here, and we got to just trust the process and give me like that 3 to 6 months. If it doesn't work, you can always go back to what you're doing before, but at least like let's see this through, and you can really see how your body's going to respond. And usually that helps. They're like, well, yeah, that's right, I can always go back to doing what I was before, but that doesn't typically happen.
Yeah, giving them that safety blanket of like, you can always go back. That's helpful. So that's how you instill confidence into your clients. But I feel like a lot of listeners, I know for myself, just building up confidence in your own abilities, right? And being able to tell somebody, yes, I can help you. How do you stay confident in your knowledge and your skill set? And how do you feel that you can really help the people that you are working with and not have self-doubt in your own abilities as a diet technician?
Yeah, that's a great topic, because I know I personally struggled a lot with like imposter syndrome when I was a newer coach, and I think all of us have that at some point.
Yes.
And the more clients you work with and the more success stories you have, of course, that's going to build your confidence of, oh, I have proof. But I also found that having a good network of other coaches or other DTRs can be super helpful, because you can learn from each other. You can kind of bounce ideas or cases off of each other. So it's not like you're so alone in it. And when I was originally just working for myself and didn't have a big network, it was hard, because I would kind of second guess myself or just wouldn't have someone to bounce those ideas off of. And I've been coaching for like 12 years now. So I have met a lot of people through the industry. And again, the bodybuilding side of things helps too, is just meeting more people that way. But I have a lot of coach friends and colleagues that we'll bounce ideas off each other and kind of send each other like, hey, I haven't seen this before. What would you do in this situation? Or, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is this what you would do? Or do you have any suggestions, or that type of thing? So I think and this takes time and kind of putting yourself out there as well, but having some other people too, to kind of just give you that, yeah, you're on the right track here. And then again, the more success stories you have under your belt, the more you'll feel confident that you can handle the cases that come to you.
So experience, just doing the job and then finding your network of people.
Yeah, and I've had mentors throughout my career too, so that was always helpful when maybe I did start seeing new cases that were something I wasn't familiar with. I didn't want to just, I think I know what I'm doing. I would hire someone who definitely knew what they were doing and have them kind of walk me through it and pay them to do that for me. So I think that's another form of continued education, is depending on what specific field you're working in, finding a mentor who can help you when those things come up.
I think that's a good point that you mentioned, like finding someone and being able to invest in yourself and paying somebody to really help you with that. Because a lot of times I feel like we hear that and we're like, okay, let's find someone and get it for free. But that's an interesting little nugget you dropped. How were you able to find, is it just kind of just being in the field, or did you find it through your continuing education credits? Did you just Google search? Like, what is the secret sauce to finding those networking and that support?
It was kind of a mix, and I do again think that me being involved in the bodybuilding world just been super helpful, just because I've been at events and things like that where I meet people, and then on Instagram, a bunch of us competitors follow each other,
Yeah.
and then a lot of us are coaches as well. So we just kind of met through our hobby in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I did work for 3 years for another team. So when I was on that team, I met, other coaches on the same team, and we developed relationships. So even though I'm no longer on that team, I still have those friendships and things like that. And we can talk business, talk shop. But I would say, just if you have hobbies within the nutrition field or the fitness field, maybe just putting yourself out there a little bit more, or going to networking events for DTRs too, so you can kind of find those people that you can start to build that network with. But I know it's easier said than done, especially these days when we work from home.
Yeah.
But it is super helpful to have that. And I think the networking, even if you're shy, I'm a very introverted person, so it took me a while to build that up, but I think that has been invaluable for me.
Yeah. And I like what you said about like you're in it. So you're kind of practicing what you're preaching. And so that I feel like allows you to make those connections pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are full time in your coaching business, which we haven't had many full-time NDTRs who are doing honestly like a dream job for many, and you had to work your way up to get that clientele. So looking back, what would you tell your former self? Like, are there any things that you would have changed in your trajectory to getting to full-time where you are now?
I think that's a good question. I'm pondering here for a minute.
Yeah, take your time.
I honestly think a lot of it is just putting yourself out there in terms of marketing. I mean, I will say I get a lot of referrals, which is fantastic because everyone loves a good referral, and that means
Yes.
you're doing something right. But in terms of social media, when it comes to like the coaching space and like hiring someone who's going to help you live a healthier lifestyle, and it's someone that you're going to have close contact with. I have my clients check in with me every week. A lot of it is going to be about personality and connection. And you kind of have to put yourself out there on social media, which was pretty hard for me at first. And I think it took me a while to really put my authentic self out there. But the thing is, if people see the authentic you, they're either going to relate to you or they're not. And they're vibe with you or they're not. But there's so many coaches out there. There's so many coaches out there. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you want someone who's educated and who can, coach you through your specific goals or your specific situation. But even when you just look at who's qualified, you're still going to have so many options. So a lot of it is going to come down to just, who do I vibe with? Who do I want to talk to every week? Who am I excited to work with? Because you're going to have a lot of conversations back and forth and everything like that. So when it comes to marketing yourself, I think just having that good mix of educating, but also showing your personality so that you can make those connections and have more conversations with people and things like that, because that's ultimately what's going to bring them to you. I know I've had people who have hired me, but they'll say, I've been following you for 2 years, and I finally made the leap, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I had no idea, but it's people are kind of learning who you are and things like that. So you do have to be patient with that stuff, but like keep that in mind of like someone might be watching me and it's just a matter of time. So just keep putting out the content. I think the content game can be really tough because most of us enjoy the work of what we do in terms of coaching or, in a clinical setting or whatever the actual job is. But a lot of us don't love the piece of marketing or what we have to do on social media. But in today's world, that is a big piece of what we have to do.
So you said you're an introvert and that was a hard spot for you. And I feel like just the comparison that can come up when you're trying to start a business and you're looking at all these other coaches who have just thousands of followers, tens of thousands of followers on Instagram and YouTube or TikTok. How did you navigate that and design a posting schedule that would help you navigate clients, but also be authentic towards you and your brand and what you're able to provide your clients?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came down to just like not taking myself so seriously. And again, this is all like I work for myself, so like nothing's gonna happen if I post something that's like a little too much for someone, or like that might not fly if you're working for a specific brand or something. People love when I post like the goofiest things, or I'm a very clumsy person, so like I'll just post me spilling things or dropping things or like bloopers, and those are like things that people relate to. So I think just like not taking yourself so seriously, even though yes, we're professionals, but showing that you're human too can be a big part of it. But in terms of like creating a schedule and things like that, I do try to have a balance of like, for me, since I am covering so many areas, I'll do like exercise tutorials, and then I'll do like client transformations or testimonials, or I'll have them do IG lives with me sometimes. Just like a really good mix. And then throwing in some personal things, just like I have my like brand page, and then I have a personal page, but everyone pretty much follows my personal page too. So it's just like letting them into my life a little bit. I like overshare personal details, but they get to know my personality and kind of see my sense of humor, or get a feel for like who they're looking at, because again, you're going to talk to me every week if you hire me. So it's like, okay, well, this is who I'm going to be talking to. This is what our conversations might sound like. So I think just having that balance of showing your personality a little bit, but also being able to educate and show what you know, and kind of once you have those testimonials and transformations, if you do that type of thing, that you can showcase. So you get, it's kind of like a big resume on your page.
Oh, I like that. It's your resume, how you're gonna pull people in and get them to trust you. So I guess in some senses, your social media presence, you're already building rapport. Like that person who followed you for 2 years, you already kind of knew your personality and saw what you did.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, yeah, you know what you're signing up for here.
Yeah, like all right, you're already good. Let's start this transformation for you.
Yeah.
That's good. And so you did mention a little bit about where your NDTR credential comes in and your background in education and nutrition, which goes to the master's degree level. But just specifically, has that NDTR credential like really helped you stand out within the coaching field? Do you find it like, what are the benefits that you have seen from the education and the credential that you hold in nutrition?
Yeah, that is like a tough question specifically about the NDTR, because to be honest with you, I don't think most people know what that means. Like when
Yeah,
they're looking at my page, they're just like, okay, she has some credential there.
something behind her name.
Yeah, like when they look at my website, they could see like, oh, like I have the master's, and I will say the master's in obesity prevention and management is very niche. So I think a lot of people will see that and are like, okay, like she works with the obese population. That is very specific.
Hmm.
And it's not all of my clients that have obesity. It's probably half, I would say. But again, that is very niche. Like when ASU, I think I was in the first year of that program at ASU when that came out,
Wow.
but it is just something that you don't see as much. So I think that does help me. But again, I don't know specifically with the NDTR. Like no one ever asked me about that. They're just like, "Oh, you're qualified. That's great."
I love the honesty in that answer.
Yeah.
So client-wise, maybe not very much. That master's degree is helpful. I see you're a part of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So does it help you maybe just with your career aspects with other professionals in the field of dietetics?
Yeah, I would say I could take advantage of that more in terms of the networking and everything. Like I said, I'm very lucky that I have networking opportunities through more of like my hobbies and my day-to-day life. But I would say if that actually kind of ties back to what we were saying before about networking, if you don't have that, I think the Academy is a great place to like look for those events or look for different things where you can connect with others there.
So, full honesty, completely transparent. You're one of the first diet technicians on the page who has a coaching business, doing it full time in the fitness area, and you're holding that NDTR credential. Do you feel like it's needed, or do you feel like your master's degree is really the cream of the crop, the best thing for you? Or
I think the master's degree is kind of the cream of the crop for me. I do feel it a sense of security with it, like I said, because it does kind of cover the nutrition plans that I provide.
mm,
And that is again big gray area within coaching. So I think if you want to be able to give those plans and do it the right way, it's a good idea to have that behind your name. And I'm always very transparent when something does like go out of scope where I'm like, oh, I'm not an RD, like I can't do XYZ. Like if someone has specific health issues, or, again, if we go back into like eating disorders or things like that, I'll refer out. But I do think it helps to have that, like, I am allowed to write this plan for you,
It's like a good insurance policy, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I love that honesty. So NDTR is listening and they want to go into coaching. A master's degree in a niche nutrition might help. It sounds like from what you're saying with the clients getting trust or trusting you faster as opposed to just the NDTR.
Yeah, because there's all sorts of nutrition certifications out there, and it's going to vary by what state you're in and everything too, on terms of like what you're allowed to do. But in terms of, like I said, doing things the right way, and we know a lot of people don't do it the right way, but at least we're trying our best, making sure we're having that background there. I do wish that they would incorporate a little bit more of that Gen Pop type stuff into the programming. I will say that. So that might be something of just, if you are pursuing your degree, maybe learning more of that stuff on your own on the side too, and just realizing like we might not be getting everything out of just that formal education there.
That's good. Or even like if there's a paper to write, focusing on that, because that's something that's missing.
Yeah, and then I did that obesity certification that I have, the pediatric and adult one. That was one of the continued education courses that I took, and I found that one very helpful. That was more like applicable info in terms of, how to deal with those populations and more approaches and things like that.
Yeah. So it's outside of that, it's pretty broad what NDTRs can do. So what advice would you give to NDTRs listening to this podcast who want to dive into the general population and do coaching and obesity prevention?
Yeah, I would say try to figure out what your target audience might be, because Gen Pop can be a lot of things. Like I specifically work with women. I do have a few male clients, but like I'm not marketing towards them really. They just sometimes come to me, But I think just having an idea of like who you might like to work with. It's like a weird mix of advice, because I think that will help you just learn more about the type of people you want to work with. Like you said, like maybe doing your specific research projects on those things and doing your own education on that side. But at the same time, when you're just getting started, I wouldn't niche down too hard, because really any experience you can get is good experience. Yes. So I think in the beginning, it's just like, all right, like let's just work with as many as people as I can work with. And then you can kind of get more selective as you grow your client base there. And I think just putting yourself out there, networking, that's a big part of it. And then continuing your education and figuring out what you're specifically interested in, like kind of pursuing that mentorship or the education classes, things like that.
Yes. Find all your open doors and walk through them. Yes. And so Liz, how can people follow you and follow along with your journey and what you're doing?
Yeah, my main social media is going to be Instagram. So I have the business page is Core by Liz, CoreByliz. And then my personal one, where I'm being goofy and all those things, is at Liz McElhaney. And that's MCELANEY.
Perfect. And is there anything else you want to say before we end our episode together?
I don't think so, but I really do appreciate you having me on. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you for sharing everything that you did. Thank you everyone for listening. If you had any, we'd love to hear any of your thoughts. So comment down below, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, and follow Liz on Instagram.
Thank you.